Hey Titans, this is Mr. Sturts back in the algebra cave. Today we're going to talk about multiplying radicals. We already learned how to simplify, add, and subtract. Now we're going to multiply. So let's get right into it here. When we multiply square root of 3 times the square root of 2, what we're going to do is we're going to multiply the radicands. And what the radicand is, it's the number underneath the radical sign. So we're going to do 3 times 2, and we're going to keep it all under the radical, and we get radical 6. Okay, now we're going to look to see, can we simplify radical 6, because we want all of our answers in simplest radical form. So if we try to factor tree 6, we get 2 and 3. Those are both prime. And if we were to write those under the radical, we don't have pairs, we don't have partners there. So 6, radical 6 is actually in simplest radical form. We can't simplify that down anymore. Okay, number 2 here, if we multiply radical 3 and radical 6, we get radical 18. And again, we want to look to see if we can factor tree that. This one I think we can factor tree. So if we put 18, if we move it over here and we factor tree 18, let's say we think of 2 and 9. Okay, and remember 2 is prime, so we're going to circle it. 9, we can multiply 3 and 3, and those are both prime numbers, so we're going to circle those. Okay, in our simplifying radicals, we're going to write out our prime numbers in numerical order underneath our radical sign. We're going to circle our partners. So we have 2 3s. For every 2 we circle, 1 comes out front. So our simplified radical to the square root of 18 is 3 radical 2. Okay, so square root of 3 times square root of 6 is the square root of 18. That simplified is 3 radical 2. Okay, get that out of the way here. This third example, if we have a little different now we have numbers before the radicals. Okay, what we're going to do is we can multiply the numbers outside of the radicals and the numbers underneath the radicals. So what we're going to do is we're going to do 3 times 2, and we're going to get 6. And we're going to do radical 2 times radical 10, which is radical 20. And again, we need to look and see, can we simplify the square root of 20? Okay, so let's try. If we factor tree that square root of 20, maybe we think of 4 and 5. We know that 5 is prime, so we're going to circle it. But 4 we can break up into 2 times 2, so we're going to circle those. And then we're going to practice our simplifying radicals again here. When we write out our long radical, don't forget the 6 out front. We're going to have 2 times 5. Circle our partners, right? We have 2 2s. For every 2 we circle, 1 comes out front. And remember, we multiply that 2 with the 6. So our simplified radical here, we're going to have 6 times 2 out front, which gives us 12. And the 5 is going to stay underneath. So when we multiply these, remember, multiply our front numbers, multiply our radicands, our numbers underneath the radical, and then look to simplify that radical if we can. Okay. Next thing I want to talk about here is when we multiply the same radical. Let's say we got radical 3 times radical 3. Okay, there's a little shortcut we're going to use that are going to make these problems go faster. When we multiply these, the long way is we would say the radical 9, right? 3 times 3 is 9. And that turns into a perfect square. What times what is 9? We know that's 3, right? So the square root of 9 is 3. Okay, let's try that again. Let's try that with 5. Square root of 5 times square root of 5. We know the square root of 5 times the square root of 5 is the square root of 25. And the square root of 25 is actually 5. Okay, look at what we see here. When we multiply the same radical, really what that does is it cancels out our radical sign, and it gives us just 3. So if we think of this in a different way, let's think of that as the square root of 3 squared. This is the same as this, right? It's just the square root of 3 twice. If we square a radical, it really just kind of cancels out our radical sign, and we just get the radicand. We get the number underneath. Okay, so let's use this little shortcut to solve. This is the last type of problem we'll do here. We're going to use this shortcut. My dog wants to have a guest appearance. Shortcut, let's solve this. 2 square root of 3 squared. Okay, now if we wrote that out the long way, that's really 2 times the square root of 3 times 2 times the square root of 3, right? It's that twice. It's squared. It's twice. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to do 2 times 2, just like what we just did, and that's 4. And the square root of 3 times the square root of 3, if we use that shortcut we just used, we know that when we multiply the same radical, it's just going to end up being 3, right? It's really the square root of 9, but the square root of 9 is 3. So 4 times 3 is 12. Okay, so 2 squared to 3 squared is actually just 12. Okay, let's do another one. Let's change this 2 squared to 3. Let's change that to maybe, let's do 4 times the square root of 5. Let's try this one. Okay, so really what this is, the squared, we're going to write it out twice. Okay, or maybe let's try this time. Let's square this one and square this one. We know that 4 squared, 4 times 4 is 16. And then the square root of 5 squared, if we time, that means it's square root of 5 times square root of 5, and the radicals cancel out. So really, the square root of 5 times the square root of 5 is just 5. Okay, and then, we got 16 times 5. We know 10 times 5 is 50. 6 times 5 is 30. So 16 times 5 we know is going to be 80. Okay, so that is our video on multiplying radicals. Thank you for watching.